it's life with a dog. It's not just about hunting with a dog. It's about life with those dogs.
What if I ask you what's the greatest retrieve of any dog you've ever witnessed? What would you say?
And those memories are where the inspirations come from for the stories.
My heart can't take it anymore. When this one goes, I don't think I can do that again. And how do you handle kind of the twilight of a dog's life, Bill?
It, it's so hard, but then with a little bit of time and those great memories, it's like, oh, I want to live those again.
Welcome to Delta Waterfowl's The Voice of the Duck Hunter podcast. I'm your host, Joel Brice. Today I'm excited to be joined by Delta's Director of Communications and Hall of Fame outdoor writer, Bill Miller. Bill has spent decades capturing the spirit of the hunt with his powerful storytelling. But he's perhaps at his very best when writing about the pursuit that stirs him most, hunting over well-trained retrievers. As readers of Bill's long-running Duck Dogs column in the Delta Waterfowl magazine know, he's shared the blind with all kinds of dogs, from polished field trial champions to gritty meat dogs who simply knew their job and gave it everything they had. And while titles and blue ribbons are nice, these dogs brought something deeper to the marsh, something that calls us back with a bag of decoys over the shoulder and a lab at the heel. It's a longing that resonates whether you're 7 or 70. In this episode, Bill reflects on the romantic side of waterfowling that's kept his passion burning brightest: the dogs, the bond, the highs and lows, the unforgettable retrieves. From his first lab to the little black pup he's eyeing as a retirement gift. Bill shares what these companions have meant to his hunting life, and while the soul of waterfowling would feel hollow without them. If you'd sooner leave your shotgun at home than your dog, this conversation is for you. Let's get started. Bill Miller, welcome to the Delta Waterfowl podcast.
Glad to be here again.
Yeah, welcome back.
Thanks.
Is the most appropriate way to say it. We've been working together for a long time. Rarely do we work face to face, so it's good to have you here in the Bismarck office.
I always enjoy coming up here. Anytime you can be in duck country, it's good to do.
Yeah. Tennessee is where you call home right now?
Tennessee, yeah. And people think of Tennessee as duck country, but I live over in what they call Middle Tennessee, and we don't get to see nearly enough ducks.
No, that's what I heard. I think, growing up in Wisconsin, when I heard Tennessee, I heard, in my mind, I thought lots of ducks. But as I've gained some experience here with my time at Delta, what is it, the western third quarter?
Western quarter, really, right out there on the Mississippi River and Reelfoot Lake. Reelfoot Lake is legendary.
That I've heard. I've heard it's, I've heard it's not as legendary in its current form as it used to be.
Well, that's a whole nother discussion.
That's a whole nother discussion. Yeah, what brings you to, well, I guess I should just say, from the introduction, people would have picked up who you are, Bill, but you're Delta's Director of Communications. But what brings you come to the office periodically for work. What brings you to Bismarck this time?
This trip was basically to work on our presentations that are for the upcoming expo, do some interviews, work on the video kind of thing. By the time this airs, it may be upcoming or it may be past.
Yeah.
But
well, we'll put in a plug for the expo then. This upcoming expo 2025. I think it's the last weekend in July. Has been, always will be, as I understand it. It'll be in
Oklahoma City.
Oklahoma. I'll be there.
I'll be there.
Bill will be there. Hopefully we see as many people as possible. Check out our website for the dates. I bet you can buy tickets.
Yep, absolutely. The website, front and center.
Beautiful. DeltaWaterfowl.org, right?
DeltaWaterfowl.org.
And it'll be on there somewhere.
Yep.
All right, Bill, we have you on the podcast today to talk dogs.
My favorite subject.
Yeah, I know you well, Bill, but I guess that's one of the parts of our relationship that we haven't really uncovered is I think a mutual love of dogs. I have dogs. You have dogs?
I've had dogs. Other than when I was in college, I've had dogs my entire life.
Yeah. Well, that's great. One of the things that I think maybe backing up just a tiny little bit, one of the themes that we've been sharing with our listeners, Bill, is this whole duck distribution concept. It's talking about duck production, change in weather, things like that. But the other one is hunter expectations, is kind of the final pillar, let's call it, of duck distribution. And I think if I'm reflecting back on my time as a waterfowl hunter, of course, I love to hunt ducks, harvest ducks, and that's a big part of the hunt. But I think one of the concerns that maybe we've been kicking around is that harvesting ducks has maybe become too much of the focus of hunting. And so as a result, if, after a series of tough duck seasons, which for many it has been, and we acknowledge that, but I think the extreme disappointment might not. Well, what do you think about that, Bill?
Well, yeah, there's every reason to think, even for somebody who's always been always about ducks as I have throughout my entire life. At the end of a season where, like we had a couple years ago and locally for me, where we logged 29 days in the blind that we'd drawn, and our whole group only took 21 ducks. That gets a little disappointing. There's a lot of skunk mornings there, and it's not skunk mornings where you miss or you flare birds. It were skunk mornings where you never saw a bird in the sky until you left at noon or 1 o'clock, and that's disheartening for anybody, no matter how dedicated you are. But where dogs fit into that is it's the dogs that keep me coming back. It's like, do I really want to get up this morning? Yeah, Carrot needs to get out there, and if I can give her a chance to go get one bird, I'm going to do it. So that keeps you going. And in a microcosm of a season, that keeps you going day to day. But in a lifetime of hunting and over a course of years, that's what keeps me going. My plan actually is I'll probably be retiring from full-time work at the end of this year. And if my gift to myself is going to be a new puppy. And I'm counting on that to keep me going no matter how tough the duck hunting gets. Is I want to get that puppy out. I want to have another great dog.
So the gift to yourself is a whole bunch of sleepless nights for a while?
Sleepless nights.
Chewed up slippers?
Lots of training. Chewed up stuff. Complaints from my wife occasionally. So
warranted, I would imagine. Yeah, Bill, one of the like I said, we were talking in that string of disappointing duck seasons. In the meantime, Delta's working on increasing duck production from targeted areas of the prairie pothole region. We have a policy team that's working on hunting advocacy and defense, working on improving public land infrastructure so we can help improve the hunting quality of the public land duck hunter, which, hey, many of us, myself and many of us listening to this podcast are. So we are working on those solutions. But in the meantime, we'd like to celebrate some of the finer aspects of duck hunting and hope that people can embrace things like dogs, things like camaraderie, things like friendship, sunrises, sunsets, food in the blind, things like that we can celebrate. And the listeners heard us call it romance, right? Yeah. And so one of the things that I don't know, I'm not super philosophical, Bill, but I think I've been looking for a way to talk about this particular quote. One does not hunt in order to kill, one kills in order to have hunted. So we're going to focus on the hunting side. And this was funny. I looked this up on Google. I said, tell me how to pronounce this guy's name. Jose Ortega y Gasset. He's the Spanish philosopher who
I've heard the line 1,000 times and I've read the name 1,000 times. I can't tell you how to
I did it, yeah.
pronounce it.
Jose Ortega y Gasset that's what actually Google said.
Okay.
So if that's right. So we're going to look, we're going to take some of the emphasis off of harvest today and we're going to live in that dog realm for a little bit. I think the first thing, Bill, I do kind of have a series of thoughts to kind of lead you through and questions, kind of to guide the discussion. And many say that retrievers are a great conservation tool, right? And they recover birds that we can't. Do you think that is that the heart of a duck hunter's love of dogs? What do you think is the primary thing that drives that romance with a dog?
That is very important. But one correction to that line that I've always heard is a well-trained retriever is the most important conservation tool a waterfowl hunter can have. A wild, out of control dog in the blind isn't going to give you that level of confidence that creates that fine, polished tool. But it's way more than that. I know that you bring your dog to work every day.
Yep.
It's life with a dog. It's not just about hunting with a dog. It's about life with those dogs.
You put the emphasis on the well-trained, and I think that's appropriate. It absolutely is. What a joy to work with a well-trained retriever. But on the flip side, I guess you made me think of the other side of the coin. Is there a situation where you wouldn't want a dog? Or is there a situation where a dog takes away from the hunt?
No. And I say that with a little bit of reservation because I haven't been a polished dog trainer. I'm still not a polished dog trainer in my entire life. So I've had at least 2 and probably 3 dogs in my adult life that qualified as meat dogs.
Mm-hmm.
That one of the things that bothers me more than anything else, it doesn't matter if it's in the blind or if it's in travel, I can't deal well with a vocal dog, a dog that's constantly whining, barking, whatever. And I grew up around Springer Spaniels. My dad trained trained horses and trained Springer Spaniels. And my first dog away from home was naturally a Springer because of that. We lived in suburban Minneapolis on edge of town, but I did have some fields pretty close. So I got to work with him every day. But I didn't have the personal experience of formally training a dog and all of these things that the dog is supposed to do. And his name was Gunner. Gunner was a meat dog. I'd shoot something, he'd go out and find it. 8 times out of 10, he'd bring it back to my general vicinity, run a couple little circles around me, drop it, and go hunting again. And it worked fine. Actually, that's the other thing too, is all of my dogs, whether they're the Springers I've had or the Labs that I've primarily had, they're multi-purpose dogs. I love bird hunting, period. And so I hunt everything with them. And one of my greatest memories about Gunner, the meat dog, was we were ruffed grouse hunting in eastern Minnesota. He put up a bird. I shot it. He was running out to fetch it, and he put up another bird virtually from the same spot. And I shot it, and they both disappeared into the trees. I'm like, 2 birds and 2 shots on ruffed grouse. It's a good morning already. All of a sudden, Gunner comes back. I do not know how he did it unless the birds happened to have landed on top of each other. But he had both birds in his mouth, one by the neck, one hanging out at each side of his mouth when he brought them out of the cover to me. And that particular day, he brought them right up to me and said, "Here, Dad, here you go." So um, a dog doesn't have to be perfectly trained. He got the job done.
So you mentioned the meat dog, and I've used that. Frankly, I use it about pretty much every dog I've ever had is a meat dog. There's a few guys in the office here that are really avid dog trainers. They just had their field trial this last weekend that they helped host, and I think it's awesome. But between the horses that I have and my kids and my job, I just, not that I'm not interested in the retriever training, I just don't feel like I have time in my life.
It's a commitment. It's like, to go to that level is a huge commitment. I've been there too. I had a dog trailer. I traveled all over the Midwest, even sometimes up into Canada to run, for me, myself, primarily hunt tests. But I've also been partners in ownership of an FCAFC dog that we campaigned with a professional trainer. So
that's a time commitment, for sure.
And a check writing. It's the sport of check writing.
It's like rodeo, fishing tournaments. I guess let's go dog training too. So what would be the difference between a meat dog and, let's call it, maybe a more polished hunt-ready dog?
Yeah, the term that I've heard most often is a finished dog. And a finished dog, to me, is a dog that is steady. It will not go until commanded to go get the bird. And that's the number one top thing, both from the perspective of the conservation aspect, because the dog can get a better mark when it's still than it can when it's out running around on where the bird is. And number two, it's a safety thing. If you got a group of guys hunting together and birds are coming in and everybody's shooting and the dog takes off and is out there running around, it adds a whole another problem for safety for the people and for the dog that's doing the retrieving. So I want that dog to be there, steady and at my side until I tell it to go. That's step number one. And then a finished dog will, if it doesn't see a bird go down, or if the bird moves as it's going out for that retrieve, you can stop it and use hand signals and whistles and hand signals to direct the dog to the area of the fall. Now, in a field trial or hunt test, it's not directed to the area. It's directed to the bird.
To the bird, okay.
That's what you're judged on in the competition. But then it picks it up, it brings it back, and then a truly finished dog will sit at your side and hold the bird until you tell it to drop it in your hand. So those three aspects are the finished dog.
How much of that, I don't want to say that, are there, a finished dog, like you're saying, are all of the skills acquired necessary to hunt, or are some of them extra?
Like I said, particularly my springers have never been great at dropping the bird in my hand. One of my dad's best dogs, Bingo, he wouldn't even really pick him up. He'd go out, Dad would shoot a pheasant, Bingo would run around, go find it, pick it up, bring it maybe 3 steps back towards Dad, drop it, and stand on it until Dad came and picked it.
And hopefully it didn't fly away, right?
Yeah.
That's the downside of a dog that drops.
Right.
Is that a live bird, it's going to take off. And I've actually had that happen to me. I think you'd mentioned steady on the shot, and that won't go until you release it. I can think of an early memory. Yeah, a friend of mine, Gary Lindsay. Gary, if you're listening, hi. If not, I remember it was a story. He and I were hunting in really low cover, and we each had our dogs. And my dog and his dog were steady to the shot when they weren't together, but they became quite competitive. So I remember the first birds came in, shot one. Then the competition was on after that. And the very next set of birds that came in, as soon as we rose up to shoot. We hadn't fired yet. Both dogs took off. And we would have actually shot our dogs had we not had the restraint to not shoot.
Right.
So then we were taking our belts off. We were cutting. I remember I think we were cutting branches to make stakes and using our belts to hold our dogs back because we couldn't. But yeah, much better. And that's a whole different aspect, is hunting alone versus hunting with other dogs.
Absolutely. And if you're into the trials or tests, spaniel trials are very, very different from retriever trials. In spaniel trials, the dog is actually out working in front of you hunting, because you're hunting flushing birds. You're hunting pheasants or chuckers or something like that, and the dog's looking for them. And when the bird goes up, part of the requirement is the dog immediately sit down and then wait to be sent for the bird. In retriever trials, in the vast majority of cases, the dog is at your side or within 20 feet of you, being handled remotely. And it starts with the dog sitting. The birds are thrown out over the field, however many there's going to be on that series. And then you send the dog to go get each individual bird.
Okay. I got a kind of a two-part question here. You've had labs most of your life?
Most of my life I've had springers, but the dogs that I've been really serious about hunting and especially competing with have all been labs.
Okay, and you have one Springer right now?
I've got one old one-eyed Springer right now. She's 13 years old.
Okay. Well, my question is, and I'm trying to think, I on one hand I wanted to ask you, are you a lab guy or are you a spaniel guy? But I'm going to kind of take a little bit of, yes, I'm both. Yeah, I'm both. But I think kind of that versatility question is that, I think if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably a duck hunter. And I think many, I do hear quite a few people taking trips for pheasants, or they hunt quail or sharptails or rough grouse, right, in the upper Midwest. If you're looking for versatility, I could imagine you train a duck dog to be steady and only do what you tell it to do and go when you want and where. But then you have, a flushing dog is different, right? I mean, there's some overlap there. I've seen people, when the dog hears the gun report, it sits down, and that's great. But I guess maybe one of the question is, do you see good duck dogs that are also equally good at
Absolutely.
At upland?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My the lab that we put the most titles on personally was Sadie. We took her through AKC Master Hunter, and she was as good a grouse dog and pheasant dog as any of my springers were. Now, she wasn't exciting to watch. When a springer gets going on a pheasant, there isn't much more exciting dog to watch than that, to me.
Mm-hmm.
But she absolutely got it done. And the nice thing about it is labs tend to be, especially when they're trained to be steady, they tend to be more controllable. And in ruffed grouse hunting, you don't want a dog that's out of your sight a lot, because
Sure.
if the dog's out of your sight, the bird's definitely going to flush
True.
out of your sight. So
do you feel for versatility with your experience? And there's lots of other breeds of dogs out there.
Oh, yeah.
But since these are the two main experiences that you've had, which do you feel is better at the kind of the versatility?
Well, I'm getting a lab puppy for my retirement, and I plan on traveling a lot and hunting a lot, and it's going to be a lab.
I find, I grew up with Springers, then labs, and I've had labs ever since. And if I kind of compare the two, both amazing breeds of dogs, high on my list. But I've always found labs to be easier keepers. When it came to the Springers that we had as kids, lots of ear infections. When you're out after a rough grouse hunt, there's just kind of a lot of maintenance, pulling all
the long hair.
Yep, all the vegetation, the burrs. Where a lab, it just seems to to just fall out. And
When I've had my yellow labs, it always amazes me. I can put them in the kennel, and they look dang near like a black lab from the mud.
yeah,
And you come back a couple hours later, and where'd all that mud go?
somebody gave your dog a bath and didn't even tell you about it. So what are some of the greatest, let's go retrieves. Like let's tell a story, because we're talking about, yes, there's the companionship, and I should say, to me, a dog is a 12-month companion. You hunt with them for a narrow window of time. So we are choosing to focus on just the narrowest part of the year, 3, 4, I suppose if you get creative, 5 months.
Yep.
But so we're talking about, it's the dog's ability to retrieve game that we couldn't get to. What if I ask you, what's the greatest retrieve of any dog you've ever witnessed? What would you say?
Gunner coming back with those 2 grouse hanging out of his mouth at one time was pretty amazing. But with my labs, there's one time I remember hunting in South Dakota, and we got there by way of, we hunted it was Halloween. We hunted on a little lake outside of Alexandria, Minnesota, first thing in the morning, and got our bluebills on that lake. It was one of those mornings where the bluebills were coming from so high you couldn't even see them, and it was snowing, but it was a blue sky, so it looked like diamonds coming down, and these ducks would just come in. So I got my bluebills, and it was my friend's lease, and he said, well, I'm going deer hunting next week, so pick up the decoys and put everything away for me if you would. So I waited out and picked up all the decoys and sacked them up for him. And Sadie and I were headed to South Dakota next. Well, we got to South Dakota hunt in time to hunt that evening for some mallards. And the snow had piled up fairly deep out there that year already. And we hiked out to the edge of this slough, and I just kind of hunkered in next to some cattails. Sadie's sitting there next to me, and this Drake mallard comes over by himself, headed for the open water inside the ice. I stood up and shot, and it was one of those where I almost spun him completely around, but then he locked his wings and glided and glided and glided and glided and glided until he literally was almost out of sight for me. And then all of a sudden I saw, when he hit the snowdrift, it shot snow up into that bright blue sunset sky. So I could tell exactly where he was. And he had gone off the shore of the lake into this clump of cattails that was maybe 20 yards out. So with open water in between. Like I said, it was almost out of what I could see. And Sadie, I'm standing up, so she's down here. I have no clue if she's seen this bird or not. So I'm like, man, that's a long way. But if I have to walk out there, it's going to be dark by the time we get. So she seemed like I lined her up and sent her, and she took off. She had obviously seen that puff of snow. She took off and ran on a line to that duck, got to the shoreline, went in the water, went out to that island, sniffed around, picked that duck up, and brought it back. I couldn't believe, I had no idea how far that really was. I wanted to know. I really wanted to know. So it was a group of writers that were getting together for a hunt, and when we got to the place we were staying, they also did some bow hunting and stuff. And I said, hey, anybody around here got a rangefinder? And he said, sure. And I said, well, I'm going to go back out tomorrow morning before we start pheasant hunting and see if I can figure out how far that was. Well, I found my tracks in the snow, and I could see that island. That was over 600 yards away that she had marked that bird and made a straight line and went out and picked it up.
That's impressive.
I got that bird mounted.
Was that bird live too?
It was live.
Oh wow. That and I bet you, Yeah, I challenged you to come up with one. You came up with two, by the way, but I made you come up with another one, and I imagine we could fill an entire podcast between the two of us telling all of the great retrieves that stick out, and that's the fun part. When I think about all of my best hunts, most of them there was a limit involved, but it wasn't so much that it was a limit. It was something exceptional about the hunt. I said on a prior podcast that I think green-winged teal are probably my favorite duck. Second place would be widgeon, and the green-winged teal would be my favorite duck because I was in college, and I was kind of hunting on my own without my dad for the first time, and it was before class, west of Stevens Point, Wisconsin, where I went to college, and it was the foggiest morning possible. And I was out there, I found a spot in the fog, and I had just this hot action with green-winged teal, and I couldn't see them till 25, 20 yards. And so it was just this kind of magical, mystical moment. So that's my favorite. And I think the same thing goes for my duck hunts. There was a friend, a location, the weather. I bet you that snow really made it jump out. But then on top of it, I think there's a bunch of my favorite hunts are because of my dog. I don't really remember the rest of it. But I can think of all of those moments with the dog.
And it's not even necessarily hunting moments with the dog. I got two stories one with Sadie, the same dog, much earlier in her hunting career, right after we started training her. In fact, we got her. She was my wife's dog because I was traveling so much with the Springer. She wanted to have a dog at home. So we got Sadie in fairly early spring. And I started working with her a little bit and quickly figured out that Sadie was smarter than I was and she could be a pretty good dog. So I had hunted the fall before with a local guy that trained, and called him up and said, "Hey, could you check this dog out? I think she could be pretty good." So I took her up there. We took her up there in July or August, and I picked her up for the first time in December to go hunting because I'd gone up there and worked with them, but she was at his kennel during that entire time. And he said, "Things are going great. We're going to be really good, but now it's freezing up in Minnesota. And what we really haven't done with this dog yet is any serious dog water work. So we need to go down to, if you can find the time, we need to go down to Georgia where he had some of his other dogs and get her in the water, really do some water work so she gets that ingrained." So I took a week off of work and we went down there, and this is totally not related to hunting, but we went and we were staying in the Howard Johnson's hotel room, and my friend down there whose place we were training on loves venison sticks, but from this one particular place in Minnesota that made them. So I took a pound pack of venison sticks down there, and I'd thrown them in my suitcase. Well, my friend and I, a trainer friend and I, went out to dinner and left Sadie in the hotel room by herself with that pound of venison sticks. Came back, she'd eaten every one except one. She left one stick for my buddy Wayne.
Left one.
To have.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of stuff outside of hunting that I'll never forget about Sadie. And those stories happen with every single dog in your life, I think.
Yeah, I have Rudy. So what's the famous Yellow Lab movie? I can't think about it. Anyway, it's quite famous. But it's about a lab that they love, but it gets in all kinds of trouble, right? And Rudy was my dog like that. I remember he had separation anxiety. I left him for the first time outside of a kennel, thinking maybe that would help him, because I'd leave in his crate and he would just howl, and I'd come back and there was a pile of spit and slobber in front of the kennel. His nose was raw from trying to get out. So I let him out. Thank goodness it was a thrift store couch, but I came back and the entire back of the couch, like a foot high, all the way across the back of the couch, was completely ripped out, and there was nothing but springs there. But yeah, I have such a long story for Rudy. But yeah, there are all those things, and I think anybody that's listening to this that has a dog, whether it's just a small lap dog or a hunting dog, yeah, there's if you're considering getting a hunting dog, yeah, they enrich your life in so many ways. I do have a question for you, Bill. As someone who's had dogs and it's such an important part of your life, and as we've described, it's such an important part of our life and our hunting. Have you ever had a period without a dog?
In my adult life, since getting out of college, I didn't have a dog when I was in school. I don't think it's been more than a few months
Yeah.
where we didn't have at least one. And there was a period in there where we had 4 at our house.
Yeah, that's
And I was traveling, and it was winter in Minnesota. So my wife often reminds me that she was out shoveling dog kennel snow quite frequently that winter.
yeah. Do you want to take a moment, Bill, for someone who's traveled so much and then with all the stories? Do you want to take a moment to say something really nice to your wife right now?
I've got something here I could read from. My wife has made my career in outdoor writing and the things I've done possible. Without her being as tolerant and gaining as much independence as she did during those years when I was really traveling. I was traveling 140 nights a year for all of our TV work I did. And she was home keeping things going and taking care of the dogs.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know who wasn't taking care of the dog during that time period, unless you were using the dogs for
Yeah.
television or your stories. Would you hunt without a dog? Would you go duck? Bill Miller doesn't have a duck dog right now. Would you go duck hunting?
I wouldn't go as often. I know that.
Yeah.
Would I go an entire year? That'd be hard because one place that I normally am not in the company of a dog, although that's going to change this year, I think, because Paul Waite, who I work with, is getting a new dog, and Paul's also who I often layout boat hunt with.
Okay.
So I think we're going to have a dog in the tender boat now this year.
Yeah.
So I did that with my dog Callie out on Lake Michigan. She didn't know it, but she was retrieving ducks in 90 to 120 feet of water. We went out and did a layout hunt for long-tailed ducks on Lake Michigan, and the guide kept her in the tender boat while I was in the layout boat, and then he'd send her to go get our long-tailed ducks that we knocked down. So
That's pretty special because
Yeah.
in a tender boat situation, that's what
that's what
kind of the
tender
job of the
boats are
boat,
for.
right?
Yep,
You
yep,
typically don't have the dog out there.
yep.
Yeah. So have you always trained your own dogs?
No, I can't take credit for, especially the ones like Sadie that went to Master Hunter, um, or any of the trial dogs that I've had. Those I've had professionally um, trained and taken to that level. I mean, I was there every single week, usually multiple times. I mean, my truck could go that 20 miles from my house to the trainers by itself. And I did some, what got me out of the game that I may get back into is when you go to a test or a trial with one dog, it's a game of you have 5 minutes of intense excitement, and then you literally sit around 3/4 of a day for your next run going,
Yeah.
twiddling your thumbs, being nervous, waiting. So that's what got me out of it. I mean, there was a while when I was pushing to get Sadie's, we had her fully trained, so I was handling her to get her master hunter. Um, I'd take off at 3:30 in the afternoon with her in the trailer from Minneapolis, drive to the Boot Heel of Missouri all night long, get up in the morning, run. If we had a bad date, we were DQ'd, so I'd get back in the truck and turn around and drive home.
Hmm.
13 or 14 hours.
That's a long time.
It is.
Yeah. So are your hunting dogs everyday companions, Bill?
Yes. Yes. They're for a really good relationship with a dog, I think it has to be. I think it has to be.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of different amazing relationships with dogs. But yeah, dogs have always been a part of my life. Like you just said, yeah, Chester, he's only 30 feet away in my office, snoozing away, and it's really enriched my life to not just leave him at home when I come to work and to come with. And guess what? When I leave to go do something else and he doesn't get to come with, go to Walmart or something like that, I just he gives me the saddest face. Just breaks my heart. But I kind of had another little question for you. So there's the field trial dog, and then there's the self-trained dog. I've always trained my own dogs, and I do think that if what you practice, you get better at. And so I think field trialing is amazing, whether you're after titles or not. What's amazing about it is it gives you a reason to practice, right? Have you seen self-trained dogs that, that people, I should say, you can self-train a dog and do field trials, but you can self-train and not do field trials. Have you seen some great, just kind of amateur self-taught, self-trained dogs?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I know we've got people right here at Delta, like John Devney, who have trained their own dogs. John is technically an amateur because he's not paid to train dogs, but the knowledge that he's gained from training his own dogs, to me, puts him at a professional level of quality. And the unique system that he's come up with and refined for doing it is, I wish I had the patience that John does with his dogs.
Yeah, he definitely has a very committed and has a really focused way of training his dogs, and they all turn out great. I've hunted with most every one of them. So you are an outdoor writer. You write a lot about dogs.
I've done the dog column for Delta Waterfowl. I've been here full time 6 years and done it the whole time, and I was doing it for at least a couple years before that. So I think I've been doing it for 8 or 9 years now.
Okay, just curious, where do you draw your inspiration for your dog columns? Is it from I had this experience that I want to write about, or something that you see, or what is it that gets you to choose a topic?
Truly, the answer of that is all of the above.
Yeah.
And it's the same for any outdoor writing. I mean, there are some things. Eukanuba is a huge part of Delta. They're a tremendous sponsor. So I know that I need to talk about dog nutrition in some columns. So some columns topics are assigned like that. But others, the magazine editor says, we want to talk about a dog's loyalty, or we want to talk about the ability of a owner or handler to read their dog. That's the column I just most recently wrote that'll be out in the Hunt Annual Edition. It's about reading a dog, how to really tell what the dog's about to do and what you think you can get it to do. And that inspiration for that came from a hunt with one of my dogs named Belle, who is out of Sadie. My smallest black lab. She was too soft for the old style of training for trials and hunt tests. She just didn't have the temperament where she could take the pressure. But great, the best nose, I'm convinced, best nose of any dog I ever had. And what I probably should have done is volunteered her for like those dogs on the baggage carousels that sniff stuff out. I'm sure she could have done well for that. With the one exception, I don't know if anybody could have ever broken her of running up and loving on everybody she ever
Yeah.
met. She was just the friendliest, sweetest little dog. But I could read her and tell what she was thinking. And the example I used in the column was a hunt just out here in Kidder County in North Dakota. She and I went out on a foggy morning in an area that I'd scouted the afternoon before for the very first time. We found some potholes back in amongst a series of hills. And I'd glassed everything, and that was back in the days when if it wasn't posted, you could go hunting it out here.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, wow, there's nobody else around here, and the ducks are flying. This could be pretty good if I can get back to that water in the morning. It'll be cool. So for GPS, so I had my topo maps out and the road maps, and I'm tracing my way back to Robinson where I was staying, so I knew where I had to turn in the dark to get back to this place. Next morning we wake up, it is fogged out. You can't see 100 feet. I'm like, oh man, how am I gonna? What? So we inched our way out there, and by the time we got out there, it was really getting light already. So I quick threw a sack of decoys on my back and walked out, and I'm avoiding climbing the hills because water's not on top of the hills. I took a compass reading from the front of the truck, and said, okay, the water's got to be that direction. But it seemed like it was taking forever for us to get there. So I said, well, maybe if I climb up on this top of this hill, I'll be able to figure out where I am and how I can get to that pothole. Well, as soon as we got to the top of that little knob, it was ground fog, and we could see through the fog enough for all these ducks we could hear flying over us. And I thought, well, why not just sit here and hunt? So we sat down and hunted. In a half hour, I had 6 ducks laying down, and I never sent her to pick one up. I just had her sit next to me. And over the course of that half hour, stuff gets spread out. The decoy bag gets here, the blind bag gets here, my calls are here, and so she goes out and picks up all 6 ducks, and I think we had a couple mallards and a pintail and some gadwall and even some spoonies. I wasn't being too particular. So it's like, oh man, this was a cool hunt. So I gather up all my stuff and we head back to where I think is the direction for the truck. Well, as soon as we drop off the knob again, we're in the fog. So now I'm following the compass, going, okay, truck's over there somewhere, so we'll head that way. At least we'll hit the road. And we go several hundred yards. And I was letting Belle just kind of run around, not making her heel or anything. And she got out of sight for a little bit too long. And I thought, well, I'll just buzz her on the collar so that she remembers that she needs to check in. All of a sudden I'm like, oh no, where's the transmitter? It's back on the hill.
I don't know where the hill is.
Which hill is it? So I get her to come in. I put her on the lead. I said, Belle, hunt her out. Hunt him up. She followed the trail right back to the top of that hill and went. Now she wouldn't pick up it was one of those old Tritronics ones that were the long tubes that were like 9 inches long with a 6-inch antenna on top. And I had it in a leather holster and it was laying right there. She took me to it, but she would not pick it up and deliver it to me.
Because I don't like that thing. I'm not going to do that.
Exactly. But that's a memory that I will always have, and those memories are where the inspirations come from for the stories.
Another question for you, Bill. I'm 51, and I know a lot of people that are avid hunters in their 50s, 60s, some in their 70s. And one of the things that I hear a lot is, this is my last lab. this is my last lab. And what they all say, it's not the potty training, it's not the training, it's my heart can't take it anymore. When this one goes, I don't think I can do that again. And how do you handle kind of the twilight of a dog's life, Bill? Or do you have any they could be inspirational, they could be tear jerkers, but how do you handle the twilight of a dog's life?
That is the hardest part. And during the brief periods when we haven't had a dog right away, that's what my wife always brings up is she says she she's a dog person, absolutely, but she's not a hunter and she's not in love with the dogs for the most part as much as I am.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had some, like I said, Sadie started out to be hers, and we had a yellow named Huck that as he was getting older and retire, he'd spend a lot more time with her.
Mm-hmm.
So they became very close. And when Huck passed, especially, it was hard for me to convince her that, let's get another one right away. But she always says, I can't stand seeing how hard it is on you when a dog goes.
Mm-hmm.
The worst one was Callie, my most recent lab. She was outright killed, and I don't want to get into the details about it. She was only 3.5 years old.
Oh, jeez.
And she was killed. And I know that kneeling at the side of her grave when I buried her is when my AFib started.
Oh, really?
I felt it. I felt something different in my chest. And months later, I was diagnosed with AFib. But it's so hard. But then, with a little bit of time and those great, great memories, it's like, I want to live. I want to live those again. I want to do it again. And unless I've got the dog there with me, I can't live them again.
Yeah, I think there's two ways to go about that. And when I was younger and a bachelor, I always thought I'm going to have two dogs at all times. When one turns 6, I'll get the next one. And that way I'll always have, old dog teaching young dog. But honestly, if I'm being really honest, when one passes, I have another one to give my attention to and to help console me. Yep. We did that as when I was a kid growing up. We always had multiple dogs, and I do remember the loss brought the other dogs so much more attention because they had their own loss as well. But I'm kind of in the pattern where the other way of doing it is lose a dog, get over that dog, and then start again. I think that's the track that I'm on. Chester's 13. He's doing great, but that's an old dog already.
Well, that's like Carrot. My Springer now is 13, and it's Carrot as in diamonds and gold kind of Carrot. We got her when she was 4, started dog already, and she had that name when she came. I'm still convinced that the breeder we got her from asked the grandkids, "What should we name this dog?" And they said, "Let's name a dog Carrot."
after probably an orange carrot. Yeah.
But she is past. Carrot is, like I said, she's blind in one eye. She had a cataract, and it was going to be really, really expensive to fix the cataract. And she's been fine she's gotten along just fine with one eye.
Yeah.
But now at 13, she's getting to the point where I'm going to take her with me. I take her with me every time, wherever I go, if there's hunting involved. And I don't send her out on ducks anymore individually. But if we've got one or two that are laying down out there after the hunt, then she and I will take a little walk, and she can go around and get a surprise and pick up a duck, which I think makes her as happy as it does me.
Yeah.
But now this fall, I want to get out there and get after the ruffed grouse again. I'd love to do a pheasant hunt. I'd love to do a real duck hunt again. And it's like, well, this is what I've got, and we're going to enjoy it together. But
Mhm.
I've also got this future to look forward to where I'm going to do it at least one more time with a new dog. And this will be my first time of seriously contemplating, well, if I get a puppy now, this might be the last one. Last one.
Yeah, yeah. I do think it's interesting because I have a similar experience with Chester. So when he was young, we hunted everything, literally everything, traveled, hunted all day long. But as he's aged, then I took great care to not overexert him because I just wanted to, I didn't want to put him in that situation where he's sore and can't even get up the next day. So I've always been careful of that. But now he can't handle much of a hunt. And so because I don't want to go without him, I've basically reduced the intensity of my hunts to match his abilities. And so, yeah, I guess maybe you're looking ahead, you see, I don't know, call it the light at the end of the tunnel, when you get that new dog. It's kind of bittersweet. Sad to think of the chapter that you're going to close, but maybe a bit exciting to think of the future, right?
Yep. Yep. And what the big advantage of this next puppy is going to be a friend I made through the Delta Expo. He's a dog trainer, guy that's bringing in dogs from Ireland. Right now, he lives about 90 miles from me on the edge of Nashville. But now his kids are gone. They're empty nesters. So he's going to move. They're only going to be about 20 miles away, and he's going to set up kind of a training center.
Oh, nice.
So I told him, put an extra room on the kennel building and put a cot in it because I'll be there.
There you go. Well, it's nice to have, the
Oh, you've got it.
facilities and someone to help you.
Oh, to me, training dogs with at least one other person and with a group to really do a good job. It's almost essential. It to have somebody to throw birds and to throw birds for and bounce ideas off each other, especially somebody that's been around a lot of dogs.
Mhm.
That trainer that took over with Sadie for me, he and I became. I mean, we happened to cross each other duck hunting up in Ontario one time. We became best friends. I was best man in his wedding, and we spent years and years traveling together and training and all over the place. I co-owned that FCAFC dog with him, and yeah, it was. Those were the days.
You bet. Well, yeah, the good old days are coming, Bill, for you. I'm going to be sad when you retire. It's been really fun working with you. I'm going to throw one more thought at you here. So I've owned dogs that only cost me a couple $100s, and I've also owned dogs that cost a lot more than that. I'll just leave it at that. But do you have any stories, whether maybe it's a dog that you have or somebody that you've seen or hunted with, of kind of an unexpected great hunting dog? Maybe it wasn't a traditional hunting breed, or maybe it was a shelter dog, or just something that would stands out to you.
I've hunted around a lot of different breeds of dogs all over the place, and um, I remember up on Canoe Island in the St. Lawrence Seaway in Quebec. We went up on a spring snow goose hunt, and the guy whose place we were staying at had it may have been a labradoodle, but it was something like that. It was the first time I'd ever seen the poodle part of a hunting dog, and poodles were, I guess, originally part of the hunting dog world. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, poodles are still eligible to run in AKC retriever tests. But anyway, that dog was freaking amazing. Just brought back every snow goose we shot, and we shot a bunch of geese up there. So that's probably the most unusual.
That's the one that stands out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't really have. I can't really draw from one. While you were thinking, I was trying to turn through my brain to think of. But you've traveled a lot more than I have for duck hunting, so I thought maybe you'd have something there.
I do know these were labs, but it was at a place called Terra Plantation down near Jackson, Mississippi. And I hunted down there several times. I actually took Sadie down there to hunt, and we got some cool pictures because Sadie was black, and the guys that we're hunting with, we had one chocolate and we had one yellow lab. And we set up a tree stand big enough where they could all sit side by side. So we had all three dogs of all three colors, sitting there on this tree stand in the timber. But those dogs at Terra, you come in and they're just laying on the front porch, and they're, kind of slow, and they're a little bit on the heavy side. I said, "Oh, I bet you those dogs get a lot of action." And they said, "Yeah, our bow hunters use them a lot." I said, "What? Your bow hunters?" He goes, "Oh yeah, they retrieve deer." I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, we shoot these deer and they'll run off into the swamp, and we give them some time, and our deer down here are small enough. These dogs will send them out into the swamp, and they'll grab these deer by the neck and drag them back in for us."
That's a good story. Yeah. I've heard of people that draw kind of side income with tracking dogs.
Yeah.
Poorly hit deer.
That's a whole nother. That's always intrigued me.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, Bill, thanks a ton for your time here, and I really want to challenge the listener to, in your quest for harvesting ducks, just we want to challenge everybody to really celebrate and notice and really think about all those finer aspects of that make hunting so great.
To make it a lifestyle. If you're all right, I got one more story to share. We were up just this last Mother's Day visiting my mom, and she gave me a box full of my old stuff that she's collected since I was in grade school and 4-H. And she said, "Get this out of here. I'm cleaning out. Take it." So I've got it sitting in my office. And I'm going through this box, and I'm pulling out art projects from like 3rd grade and Cub Scouts, when we do little simple woodworking stuff and Cub Scouts and stuff. And I realized it's all been about ducks. I've got a letter holder that's the back part is shaped like the top half of a duck, and then the front part is the feet coming up, and it's painted like a mallard. So I've got that. I've got a fabric art project that I entered in the county fair that's a pintail made with different fabrics laid on the board. The books, the old books I had that I've been reading since I was virtually old enough to read, all about ducks and duck hunting. It's been about ducks, and I don't see that changing.
Well, here's to many more falls and great experiences with dogs and sharing camaraderie with fellow hunters.
It's been great. Thank you.
It's been great. Well, thank you, Bill. Appreciate your time. Appreciate all our time together.
You bet.
We'll keep talking. You take care.
All right.